we need to know about how to return the gifts they give us. And everybody will probably smile at this, learning how to be at peace with what we don't know. Even just yesterday, I got a call from somebody who didn't know how to get her father to go to a doctor. And I thought to myself, God, I wish I had a dime for every time I heard that question, and even a penny for every time I didn't know how to answer it. I mean, really, and people have asked me, because I've been doing this a long time, how do you answer those questions? And I say, you know what, the truth is, all I can say is tell people what other people, the experiences other people have had in doing that, and help them understand that it's just a very, very difficult process, that there aren't dot point solutions to these questions. And mostly I had to learn to be at peace with myself. It became a lot easier when I knew that I didn't know everything. And when I could be at peace with that, when I could not feel the anxiety and not the assumption that other people out there, all of you, had answers that I didn't have, then I was able really to be a much better servant, I believe. Also, I think it's important, as we've grown as an institution, as an organization, as an association, it's very natural for us to create systems that separate us from the people we serve. It became very important to me to recognize that I needed to stay in touch with people. I couldn't serve them unless I was in a relationship with them. And so it was just a lesson for me that was very important. So the organ that matters most, also this became very evident, and everybody who writes about Alzheimer's and caregiving relationships recognizes this, that what happens here is more important than what happens here. It's really true. And that's actually a fundamental principle, I believe, in caring for people with dementia, because we tend to be sort of cognitively wired, and we sort of hyper cognitive. We think that people are more human or something, the brighter and more capable they are intellectually, when I would argue just the opposite. That really it's people who know how to be patient and loving and attentive that are really living the higher virtues. And I often think of my father, for instance, he died young. He was 58 when he died, and he was a really brilliant guy. He was an electrical engineer, very smart. He was frustrated with me quite often in life because I just didn't have his intellectual capabilities. I'm sure he was frustrated, though he never showed it. But when he died, I remember talking to my sisters, and I remember saying, honestly, it's not Dad's intellectual abilities I'm going to miss. It's his kindness, his gentleness, the memories of him kissing my mother on the cheek when he came home from work, playing baseball with me in the backyard. I mean, the things that matter most, right? And you all know this. I often, when I do presentations particularly for people in care facilities, I'll ask the young people, when I'm talking about this principle, I'll say, let me ask you something. Would you rather be in a relationship with somebody who's got a third-grade education but treats you like a queen? Typically they're women, so treats you like a queen, or somebody who's really bright and smart, has got a higher education, but he's not very warm and affectionate. And 99 times out of 100, they all say, well, of course, I'll take the person who's got the third-grade education who treats me well. One woman said, which one of them has more money? I said, not fair, because even if you took the one with more money, you're still going to want the kind one in the end, right? I mean, the point is that some things in life are black and white, and we work in an industry that is really built on that very principle. There is absolutely no doubt that what happens here is more important than what happens here. And that's a great tool to be able to pass along to care partners and caregivers to help them understand that the person you love doesn't have to be correct. They don't have to be right. It doesn't matter. They just need to know that you're in this battle with them. That, again, it's our job to keep people together, to keep the connections. And when we get into this sort of battle with people, intellectual battle with people, what we do is we're like Alzheimer's, pulling cells apart. We're doing the very thing that we're fighting. We become the enemy we're battling. So I think it's really important. The heart remembers what the head forgets. Compassion trumps correctness. There's 1,000 ways to say this. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I often talk about why Trivial Pursuit is popular, and people, have lots of answers for this, and really what it comes down to is we like to be right when other people are wrong. We like to take the prize home, but the only way you can take the prize home is to be more correct than all the people around you, and that feels good. It's a really dangerous attitude in life in general, and particularly in the industry in which we work. It's not about being right, it's about being good. And I argue that we're not paid to be good, we're not paid to be right, we're paid to be good. That's what matters most. It's not about what we do, whether we meet our metrics, although that's incredibly important, I get that. It's really, and we're much more likely if we get the who we are piece right. If we get that right, we're much more likely to get the what we do part right. So the age that matters most, this is an interesting sort of development over time that became important to me to understand that when we're talking about Alzheimer's, we're not just talking about old people anymore. We're talking about a long, slow, corrosive process that begins with habits, and the habits begin when we're young. And Greg and I were just talking about this, how, this is, I think the opportunities for us as an association are going to broaden over time, and we're going to recognize that we're talking about a continuum, a progression of changes through time. And that our mission is going to be to reach out to people who are pre-symptomatic and even pre-symptomatic, to set patterns in life that ultimately reduce the number of people who will ultimately get the disease. So I just found that really fascinating. And of course, we've been talking about this off and on a bit today, and we're hearing more about it. We will hear more about it as research progresses. That we will ultimately, I'm convinced of this, we will manage Alzheimer's before we'll cure it. We'll be able to slow the progression. We'll be able to put the onset date off by a number of years. And a lot of it will have to do with how well we intervene with people who are sort of destined or susceptible to Alzheimer's. The people who matter most, now this seems self-evident, but I think it's really, we're always in danger of putting our professional constituents ahead of the people we serve. And for me, it became very important to continue to remember that my association is with the people who have been damaged by Alzheimer's and the people who love them. And sometimes we have to make choices, I think, where we have to put the needs of the people we serve ahead of the other professional people with whom we are in relationship. And it's very important, I believe. Just a little note about language. I think, we're always struggling with this. Are we talking about caregivers or care partners? Are we talking about people who are demented or people who are living with dementia? And I actually came to the conclusion for myself that this debate we're having within ourselves and within us as a group is a really healthy thing. It's a healthy debate to have, because we really shouldn't settle for any description. And what we really need to do is think about people as individuals, as one person living with Alzheimer's disease, one person whose brain has been damaged by this disease, is a unique, full human being that happens to have a disease. And I don't, to sort of classify everybody into a group, I think is devaluing to individuals. So I think we just need to be careful about language. When we talk about, I think it was David Snowden who coined or popularized the expression that Alzheimer's begins in childhood. And what he means by that, of course, is he's one of the first people to recognize that we create good habits, we reduce risk. Good lifestyle habits reduces risk. So, but I also think that caregiving is, whatever your word we choose to use, is also begins in childhood. And what I mean by that is when we shape an ability within ourselves an ability to relate well to other human beings and to recognize the preeminence of being loving and patient and understanding and tolerant in the relationships we've been privileged to be associated with along our lives. Those are the very skills and the virtues that become critical and essential when we are caring for another person with dementia. It's not how much we know, again, what we do, it's who we are. And for me, in reflection of my time with the Alzheimer's Association, I feel very grateful that I worked somewhere that allowed me to look at this experience through spiritual or soulful lenses. it became very important for me to recognize that this is a battle not against flesh and blood. It's not a disease. It's really something about how do we, as people who are privileged to help other people dealing with this illness, how do we keep people together in harmonious, loving relationships? And every conversation I ever had with a care partner, a caregiver, was always really ultimately about that. I may not be able to tell you how to get your dad into a shower, but I can tell you that being patient and attentive to him is much more likely to enable you to succeed at that. You know what I'm saying? But I had to know that. I had to experience that somehow. I had to know that that was true. So we are in a very soulful organization. It may not feel that way to you, but we are. And so I hope that ultimately in your continued careers here that becomes a part, if it isn't already, becomes a part of how you view yourselves. I love that picture. So the tasks that matter most, fight the disease, not the one you love. You know, we all, those of us who are privileged to do programs especially, we've read the books, we've read the literature, we understand behaviors have meaning. Be careful about your mood, because people with dementia will mirror your mood. We know all the language and so forth. But I think it's also important to understand that we're trying to draw people into, we are, not only are we in kind of a spiritual battle, we are also warriors, I believe. But the important thing is to recognize that our enemy is the disease. And I don't have any trouble saying that I believe that Alzheimer's is diabolical. It should not exist on the planet Earth. It should not exist. And our challenge as human beings is to get rid of it. You know, a world without Alzheimer's is a very soulful expression. It's about, you know, creating opportunities for us to live full and meaningful and joyful lives. And that's combat. You know, we're in a fight. So I think sometimes we need to be very evident about that. When we're attracting people into our association as constituents, we need to draw them in as warriors. And we need to help them understand that we are fighting a battle and we can't win this war without you. You know, so it's kind of the paradox of knowing how to be gentle and how to be tough simultaneously. There's so many other things I could say. One of the things that I ended up thinking a lot about is that last expression, suffering has meaning. Because, and I end up developing kind of a dot point presentation that I give, particularly in care facilities, because people are like, I hate this job, I can't wait to get out of here, I'd rather go work at Farm and Fleet. And I'm trying to, because it's very difficult, and so I'm trying to help people understand how to find meaning in the struggle. And I realize that principle applies also with spouses and children who are wrestling with their parents and their spouses who are living with dementia. And the dot point of this was, the simple title is The Benefits of Being in a Relationship with Somebody with Dementia. And the reason I developed this list and talking about these ideas with them is because I heard over and over again, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, that people would say, you know what, those years caring for my wife were brutal. They were probably the hardest years of my life, but I wouldn't trade them for anything. It's like Courtney's expression that we learn in failure. Well, it's a universal principle that applies in all situations, particularly when we're battling a disease like Alzheimer's. And I think people really learn about themselves in the crucible of the fight. They learn, I've seen people become more patient and loving and attentive, you know, tapping into virtues they never thought they had. The love and the bond that increases between people is just astonishing. And it makes me very, very, I'm very inspired to see that. And I hope that if I'm ever in the situation that I've seen thousands of caregivers in, I hope that I have the courage that they've had. But it's important to recognize that we're fighting a disease and not a person. And you know, another interesting thing to me, I worked in high school and just out of high school, I worked in a couple of nursing homes as an aide. I remember learning this even back then, that the most combative people sometimes were the healthiest people. Because they were the ones who were saying, you can take everything away from me, but you're not going to take my right to say no. I don't want those green beans and I don't want to get out of bed, so leave me alone. And I'm thinking, yeah, you go. My bosses say, no, you need to get her down to the dining room. But I'm thinking, but she's doing something that I would do if I were in her shoes. You know what I mean? And I think we have to remember that the people who are most combative in some ways are just trying to hold on to their dignity, their right to be independent and to have some sense of being able to manage their own minds and their own lives. And so that principle became very, very important to me through the years I've been at the association. So again, the surprise that matters most, I believe, is understanding that it isn't just a brutal battle that everybody dies, that some good things come out of this fight, that there is meaning in suffering, that we end up becoming better people, we end up feeling proud of our ability to endure the difficulties, and we've kept another human being happy and safe when they otherwise would have been locked away in an institution like Auguste Dieter was. I think probably you all know this parenthetically. You know the name of the institution where Auguste Dieter was placed? Does anybody know this? It was called the Asylum for Lunatics and Epileptics. So in those days, that's what we did with people with dementia. We put them in literally lunatic asylums. Well, we've come a long way, and we are the people who have made that possible. We and the caregivers who have demanded better. So, you know, we have a tremendous virtue to uphold in our careers. So, but I try to help people understand, and these are the things they tell me, that they found themselves in a crucible where it was like a classroom. They found themselves better able to live in the moment, to put everything right side up, which by that what I mean is that they came to understand that arguing with my spouse doesn't work, but loving her does. You know, these are lessons that we all sort of know, but when you're in that battle, when it's the only possible tools you have, you learn things about yourself you can't learn in any other way. And if there's any meaning, I guess, in the presence of Alzheimer's being on Earth, maybe it's that. Maybe it's that, you know, it's not that people with Alzheimer's need us, maybe we need them. So this is a very short presentation. You're happy to know. I'm really and so I started thinking about this, and I thought, so the picture on the right is obviously, it's off of some stock photo thing of many of you might have already seen this picture. A young man who's holding his father who ostensibly has some form of dementia, and a young mother who's holding her baby. And I'm thinking, they're the same pictures. You know, what we do is really not rocket science. It's just about trying to recreate here what has happened here and all through life. And I'm particularly sensitive to this right now because, you know, we all go through changes in life. You know, there's only one way to experience life. You've got to come out of your mother's womb. You can't stay in there very long, any longer than 9 months, right? You'll be happy to know that. Yeah. And then one day you've got to walk down that sidewalk to the school bus and turn around and see your mom waving goodbye, telling you there's going to be chocolate chip cookies for you when you come home. And then later you're going to go off to college and your dad is he's going to have a very hard time letting you go. You're going to get married and you're going to wonder if you've made the right decision. And then someday you're going to retire and you're going to leave a career behind. These are natural changes through life. And that's the definition of life. And ultimately we're going to move from here to another existence, right? There's just no way to avoid these changes. The question is, who's with us along the way? Not what did they do for me, but who were they? You know, did they genuinely love me? Were they genuinely understanding of my experience? And we can't avoid the changes, but we can certainly make them a lot easier for people by how well we love them. And that's all I've ever tried to say. Anyway, I didn't expect to be tearful. I really hoped I wouldn't be, but it's just my nature, I guess. So it's really, that's all there is. And it's been a wonderful privilege. As I was telling Ann and Megan on the way over that this is probably my last trip to Des Moines, at least as an Alzheimer's Association employee. So it's been a really wonderful privilege. I probably won't see many of you again, I suspect. It's been a wonderful privilege. I just wish you well, and I'll be watching.
it, please.
Well, yeah. There are some
You could
changes in
follow us.
life that will optional.